Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the PK's podcast. I'm Ron Blester. It's good to have you here. We're on all the different channels. We're on Audible. We are on Spotify. We are on iHeartRadio. We're on just about every platform there is. YouTube is our main one. So make sure that you hit subscribe and hit that notification button so that you know when things are going to go live. So, let's see. We are on episode 5 of season 1, and I am just really, really excited about what we are going to be talking about today because we're going to be talking about a veteran's reflection on faith and endurance. So, as many of you know, I am a veteran. I'm an Army veteran. I was in the Army for 7 years. I was a combat engineer, track vehicle crewman. I worked right alongside the 12 Bravos, and also we were mechanized. So most of the time we were mechanized with mechanized infantry or mechanized armor. I was in Desert Storm, and I came back with PTSD, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, and all kinds of other stuff that goes with that. So thank you, Army, for giving me that stuff. But anyway, but knowing that, just know that in God's strength, it's not in my strength, it's in all my weaknesses. So you'll hear me talk about my PTSD, you'll hear me talk about chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia and all kinds of other stuff, but it is not in my own strength. It is in God's strength that I am made strong. It's through my weaknesses that He is made strong. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about that, but not too much. As many of you know, I am getting ready to go to Vietnam for a trip to help with just a leadership conference with pastors and leaders. I was talking to our leader, Winston Bowie, today, and he said there was 360 something people already signed up for this conference. So, yeah, I'm going to be speaking a couple of times while we're there. We're going to be doing some youth ministry and other things of that nature while we're in Vietnam. So be praying for us as we get ready to do that. As we get ready to go and minister, pray that God's protection, pray that God speaks, pray that the Holy Spirit will fall like never before in that country. They are hungry for God. So if you want to know more about that, you can check out my Facebook page at PK's Pulpit. You can also check out YouTube, where I'll be talking a lot about that. Hopefully be posting some videos from that. But anyway, let's get back to this episode. Enough of the commercials and all of that stuff. So in today's episode, this is for anyone who's ever felt tossed around by life. Many of us have been tossed by life, and we don't know how to, navigate those things. Storms don't just show up in the weather. They hit our marriages, they hit our finances, they hit our faith, and they hit our health. And the question isn't if the storm will come, it's how you will respond when it does. Because sometimes the most spiritual thing that you can do is steady yourself in the wind. You think about the sails, and you think about how ships are tossed to and fro and all of that. And sometimes we've got to learn how to steady ourselves when those things come. I mean, you think about being on a ship, you think about having your feet spread apart, that solid foundation and all of that. But it also comes with that, you have to have a solid foundation whenever you are in life. You've got to be able to reach out to people. You can't just turn inward. And so the first part of this, we're going to talk a little bit about Jonah. So Jonah, everybody knows the story of Jonah and the whale, and the great fish and all of that stuff. But, Jonah was running from God. He ran because he didn't want to go to Nineveh. Nineveh was that place that he just did not want to go to. He didn't want to be a part of. He didn't want to be around it. He didn't want to go near it. And so sometimes storms come because we're running. Jonah ran from his assignment, and the storm followed him. It says in Jonah, it says, but the Lord hurried a great wind upon the sea. Jonah ran. Jonah ran from his assignment, and God hurried a great wind upon the sea. Sometimes those winds, maybe it's God that's trying to push us into something. You see, God wasn't punishing Jonah, he was redirecting him. The storm wasn't the end of Jonah's ministry, it was the beginning of his awakening. You see, God wanted to wake Jonah up and say, hey, I told you you need to go to Nineveh. Now you need to get there, and you need to get there as soon as possible. But Jonah did not want to do that. Jonah did not want to go to Nineveh, but God made a way for him to get there. And he could have taken the boat and went the easy way, but no, he decided he had to get tossed overboard and get thrown up on the shore by a great fish. And so, let me ask you this. Is there something God's been asking you to confront and you've been avoiding it? Is it possible that the chaos you're in, is connected to the calling that you've been dodging? Sometimes God's going to place things in our lives to make us realize that we need to put our trust in him, and we need to do what he's telling us to do. You see, God doesn't send storms to destroy us. He uses them to turn us. It's when the wind comes to us, I'm not a sailor. Don't even take this, but I've seen enough movies to say that, hey, I am a sailor. But if you ever saw the one with Russell Crowe, the Commander, can't think of what the title of it is, but if you watch something like that and you see that great ship, when the wind, they're in that storm and they start turning that ship with the sails, once they get the wind hits those sails, man, you can fly. And so it's important that we stay in with God. God doesn't send storms to destroy us. He uses them to turn us toward him. And so, we have to do that. But then, we think about Jesus. I know. Think about Jesus, in the storm. What was he doing? He was sleeping in the storm. He was sleeping in it. And so other times, we come in the storms, they show up while we're right in the center of God's will. Jesus was in the boat with his disciples, and still the storm came. We can be right where God wants us to be, but there's still going to be these storms that come up against us. And we have to be able to recognize that. We have to recognize that there are times when God when the devil's going to send storms against us, but we have to recognize that God is in control of it. And we can't just run. We can't run away from those things. You see, Jesus, when he was sleeping in that boat, what were the disciples doing? The disciples were all up in arms. They're like, whoa, what's going on? Why is this coming against me? Why are these things happening? But Jesus, he wasn't panicking. He was sleeping. He said, peace, be still. This wasn't just a command to the wind. It was a command to his disciples' souls. It was a command to them that, everything's going to be all right. You see, the disciples were doing everything right, and still the storm came. Why? Because Jesus wanted to show them that peace isn't found in circumstances. It's found in proximity to him. They were all in the same boat. Jesus didn't get panicked. Jesus didn't panic. He said, peace, be still. Not only was he saying, peace, be still to the storm, he was telling that to the disciples so that they would figure it out and say, oh, wait a minute. Jesus is here, because Jesus is still in the storm. What does your peace depend on? If the winds picked up today, would your faith be anchored, or would it drift? I'm going to say that again. If the winds picked up today, would your faith be anchored, or would it drift? Where are you at in your walk with God today? Where are you at? Are you in the boat with Jesus, or is Jesus out of the boat? Because if you're in that boat with Jesus and the winds are blowing, guess what? He's saying, peace, be still. But if you're not, what's happening around you? probably chaos. So it's important that when we have storms come against us, that Jesus is in that boat with us. Jesus is there. Jesus is at that point where he is like, dude, I'm here. I'm here with you. Why are you panicking for? Why are you getting anxious? Why are you getting fearful? I'm right here. Or are you so far away from God that you can't hear his voice like that? Where are you at with him today? And then I ask you, are you like Paul, enduring through the storm? You know, Paul was shipwrecked. He was tossed. But you know what? He was still trusting. See, he didn't avoid the storm. He endured it. And because of that, everyone with him was saved. I mean, think about that. I mean, everybody on that ship, when he told everybody on that ship that you have to do exactly what I say. If we don't, everybody's going to perish. But if you do it, everybody's going to be saved. And when he got on board that ship, what happened? Or when they got off the ship, what happened? They started building a fire. And then what happened? A snake came out and grabbed hold of Paul's arm, but he shook it off into the fire. You see, Paul, he didn't avoid the storm. He didn't panic. He was probably a little concerned, but you know what? He endured it. And because of that, everyone with him was saved. Everyone. You see, not one of you will be lost. Only the ship will be destroyed. Only the ship. That was it. See, you may lose the job. You may lose in a relationship. You may even lose your platform. You may lose the pulpit. You may lose wherever you're at. But you know what? But if you've got Jesus, you haven't lost your life. And that's what's important. You've got to stay close to Jesus. You know, I was writing a little bit today. I was getting my messages ready for Vietnam, and one of the things that I wrote was, and I've heard this quote before, but it's doing with Jesus. Are you just doing things for God? Are you doing things just for God? Or are you being with God? You know, there's a huge difference in that. You know, we can just do things. We can do things for the church. We can do things for this and do things for that. But are you being with Jesus? Are you there with him? Are you there when the storms are raging? Do you feel him close? Do you feel him where he's at? You know, I think about my life as a veteran. You know, I've learned that discipline isn't just about rules. It's about being ready. It's about knowing what to do before the storm even hits. You know, one of the things that as a soldier, as a veteran, we're always ready for what the next thing is going to happen. You know, whenever I get ready for a trip, you know, I try to think farther out ahead of what might happen and what might not happen, and I'm just ready. Because when something does come up that is out of the ordinary, which usually does, I'm ready for it. I'm ready for it. But, you know, it's about being ready. It's about knowing what to do before the storm even hits. You know, we think about, you know, hurricane season, or I'm getting ready to go back to Oklahoma too, and I think about tornadoes and all of that, you know, and it's about being ready. What am I going to do when those things happen, you know? You see, in the military, we're trained under pressure. So we could lead under fire. You know, that's why they have us do all the stupid stuff in basic training. You know, go through a gas chamber so we know what it's like. Or crawl across a big open field that's full of rocks and somebody's shooting over your head, you know, while you're crawling, and you see tracers all the time so that you know what happens. You know, I think back when I was in Desert Storm, and I think about, you know, when we were facing a battle, and during that night, as we started rolling into the Republican Guard and stuff, I'm seeing the artillery go over my head. I'm seeing tracers from each side, seeing tracers in front. I'm seeing, cobras come up beside my tank and shooting missiles over the horizon and blowing stuff up. But, yeah, I was scared. But and at that time, because of that, I had my trust in Jesus. You know, there were still things that I saw that I didn't like, I didn't appreciate, but I know that with the military, we were trained under pressure so we could lead under fire. And that's what soldiers do. They lead under fire. And as soldiers of Christ, we should be able to lead when we're persecuted, lead when things come against us, lead when the winds of this world come against us and try to destroy us. So in faith, it's no different. You see, prayer builds your reflexes. The word strengthens your core. Community keeps your footing, and worship keeps your heart open. You see, we train in peace for what you'll need in chaos. So every day we should be spending time in prayer. We should be spending time in the Word. We should have community with other believers. And then we need to worship. And worship comes in all kinds of different ways. It comes in being still before God and just listening for Him. It comes in the form of music and praise and gratitude and being grateful and all of those things. But if the only time we ever just reach out for God is when we are in trouble, we're not going to be ready. Because we won't know how to pray. We won't know the Word. We won't have a community of believers around us, and we won't know how to worship. So if you're in a peaceful place right now, you need to be training yourself for what you'll need when that chaos does come. So whether you're like Jonah or like the disciples panicking or like Paul enduring, one thing is true. God is in the storm. He is always there. And He's just not trying to get you through it. He's trying to grow you. Grow something in you because of that storm. You see, we don't grow when we're not broken down. Can't grow. It's like a seed. You just can't throw a seed out on the ground and it just starts sprouting. A seed has to germinate. It has to be tossed around. It has to be buried, and then when it's buried, all of a sudden, the outer layer starts to rot off or whatever, and then it starts to sprout. But you see, God is in that storm. He's not just trying to get you through it. He's trying to grow you, to grow something in you because of it. So don't waste your storm. Let it build your endurance. Let it deepen your faith. Let it anchor your peace. And if you're in the middle of it right now, hold steady. Hold steady, because God is there with you. You see, He's not far away. He's in the boat. He's on the water. He's in the wind. And He's still speaking peace. He's still speaking peace to you. So if that's you today, I want you to leave me a comment down. If you've watched this whole thing, leave a comment, because I want to be able to pray with you specifically about whatever it is that you might be going through, whatever it is that God is, or whatever storm you're facing, whether it's, God allowing these storms to happen so that you can grow, so that you can endure, whatever it is, just know that He's not far away. He's in that boat with you. He's on the water. He's in the wind. But I want to be able to pray with you specifically and ask that God will just be with you. But that's today's episodes. Thanks for joining me today on the PK's Pulpit. Next week we're going to be exploring what happens when ministry success doesn't look the way we imagine, and asking the big question of what if. So make sure to subscribe, share this episode, and remember, you weren't meant to do this alone, and we're in this together. I'll talk to you guys next week. Thanks a lot.